live. So
It's
that
live.
thing, yeah. So now it's live. As soon as it starts saying webinar streaming, it's live.
Sorry guys for the delay. We had I had to reboot my computer. So welcome to channel 27. Hold on.
Channel 27.
Channel 27. Today is going to be a really educational day, exciting day. We have Sam Geppi on today. He is a amazing Vedic astrologer. I've watched the first video for sure. He did it on relationships. I'm going to let him talk about his websites and everything. I've learned a lot from him. And so Sam Geppi, thanks for coming on my channel, and it's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too, Heidi. And I actually saw you had a thing one time with someone else, and I think you said that was the only video where there were no thumbs downs. And then I went to our previous video, there were no thumbs downs.
I noticed that.
And it happened when I think you weren't able to live stream, so there weren't as many views. So this will be good, and thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. It's always fun to talk to you. And I always watch your YouTube. So, and Sam is definitely not afraid to speak the truth. I do want him to touch base a little bit on the zodiac, because I've been getting a lot of questions like, what zodiac do you use? And everybody's like, well, I'm this and I'm that. And, let's just start there. Sam,
okay.
And give a little bit about, because I use the sidereal zodiac. I've tried it both ways. I love Ernst. Ernst has kind of swindled me into it a couple of times, and I can't do it.
Oh, God. All right. So I'm not going to look. I have respect for what all people are doing. Right. Honestly, the thing is that you have the two zodiacs, but you want to understand, and this is not really a debatable point. It's not ambiguous whatsoever. In India, in all the Indian texts, the Indian astrological texts, they were using the sidereal zodiac. It was clearly mentioned. It was clearly understood. There is no tradition of sidereal Vedic, of tropical Vedic astrology in India, not on any level. And about a decade ago or so, a couple astrologers, mainly one astrologer, started, floating the theory that maybe this was the case. And then after a while, it started to get some traction with some of the students, not really with anyone else. And it took a while and a while and a while, and then people started to do it. Look, the thing is that if people want to use the tropical, Rashi's zodiac of the 12 signs, and then sidereal nakshatras, they're free to do it. I mean, it's not a crime against humanity, and it's great that everybody's studying astrology if they're doing astrology. But you have to understand that these astrological systems developed around these calculations. So the reason, and there should not be a false equivalence. And in fact, this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to be talking about this a lot more, even on this class with you, is that right now, one of the biggest things that we have, one of the biggest problems we have, even as a culture or as a country or as a world, is this false equivalence between what's actually knowledge and wisdom and what's just like opinions about facts. Or we kind of live in a fact-free zone now where anyone's opinions can be just as authoritative as fact. Like you can measure the unambiguous chain of 2,000 years of scientific tradition against what 3 or 4 guys say and say, well, I don't know, it all looks the same to me, because there's no weight in this world between, a tweet about the cosmic truth or a tweet that's, calling someone a name and burning them. They both look the same. And so again, and I'm not trying to minimize or, insult people that are using tropical, zodiac, and sidereal.
Right.
But you just have to understand that was not part of Indian tradition whatsoever. And the entire practice is based around those calculations. So this is the part where it starts to get really weird. And when I started talking about it last year, it was because there was also a lot of false statements about it, where people were saying Indians always use tropical. Well, that's not true. They never use tropical zodiac to calculate charts. And the Indians lost knowledge of the precession. There's no proof of that whatsoever. And other things like this. That's what starts to confuse people, is when false statements are made that then really start to confuse people. So what I did is went back and showed the tradition in the text, starting with literally like the Yajurveda, where you can see they have a total knowledge and mastery of the way the sky is laid out, that there were 12 portions that connected with the seasons and with the soli lunar months. And that's what the tropical zodiac is. So beside all the history and whatnot, we also need to understand what's the difference between the two calculations. Literally, when someone is saying they're using tropical zodiac, what they're doing is they're taking the seasons on Earth and the seasons in the northern hemisphere and projecting that into space in order to find where the planet is in the sky. That's literally what the tropical zodiac is. That's not an exaggeration. That's what it is. If that seems irrational, it is kind of irrational.
Yeah.
It was irrational for thousands of years. This is why, and India knew that's what it was, and they never did it. It's just very simple. But that's literally what it is. You're taking the seasons on Earth, which is not the same as the fixed stellar portions surrounding the Earth. So here's the thing. Planets circle the Earth, they're circling the sun, but from our vantage point, they are one of many objects that we are measuring from Earth, and we're measuring things against the sidereal sky, including the tropical zodiac. We measure the tropical zodiac even, and the precession in reference to the sidereal sky. Even the tropical zodiac is measured in reference to the sidereal sky.
Yeah.
This is why even things like the age of Aquarius. What does the age of Aquarius mean? Well, it means the Earth's precession is going to precess back in alignment with sidereal Aquarius. It'll happen in about 500 years. It's not tropical. There is tropical, what's called tropical zodiac is literally the seasons in the northern hemisphere, the sun's path projected into the sky in order to find the object circling the Earth. So again, what do? Do we find it directly by looking into the sky and measuring what's behind the planet as it's circling us? Or do we take our point of view and project it into the sky to find it? Well, it's very clear what the Indians did. There is no ambiguity. You just look in the text. It says very clearly, nakshatras, rashis occupy the same space in every astrological text. So because you can take and cherry pick little verses from other texts, and it's usually 3 or 4 verses out of the whole history of Vedic literature, you can find 3 or 4 verses here and there and some little things to gripe about or to sort of, make your case. Then you can say, well, see, this shows they were using tropical zodiac. No, it doesn't. It shows that they understood that there was also the seasonal, zodiac, so to speak. But they were more related to their months. In fact, that's literally what they were in India. So I have a big article that's coming out on this. I don't know how much we want to get into the weeds about this, but
yeah. No, well,
you brought it up.
Tell everybody about your websites too, and about your school that you have, and tell everybody about that too.
Yeah, well, one of the easiest things that people can do is subscribe to my YouTube channel, actually. It's very easy. And I made it easy. samsyoutube.com actually goes right to my YouTube channel where you can just subscribe to it. But other than that, my other website, you can go to samgeppi.com. And basically, I invite people to join the email list and to stay in touch, right? And so I mainly teach, but it's also interesting that we're talking about this now because all that stuff that I started talking about last summer also came out right around the eclipses. So these eclipses are big in bringing out the truth. Yeah. And one last thing, and then we'll move on. I started talking about this last summer around the eclipses, and then what happened is 6 months later, and this is relevant to the eclipses, 6 months later, there was a conference in India. I was actually supposed to teach at the conference in Calcutta. I didn't go because I had to meet with another Indian teacher. But at that conference, a very prominent Western astrologer who was the head of the ethics council of an organization called ISAR, which is the something of International Society of Astrological Research. The head of I think he was ethics council, got up and gave a speech about how bogus sidereal zodiac is. Basically the same kind of things that we've been hearing, at least in excess from some of the Vedic astrologers. But he's a Western astrologer, and he got up and said the same stuff. But actually, it was even a little bit better researched. And it's not just that he offended people, but he basically revealed the sort of ignorance in that sort of polarizing of the discussion. And he had to resign his chair at the ISAR Council. This was the last eclipse that we had. Wow. So the eclipse that happened in January in Aquarius or early February which was opposite the one that started last summer, showed the same kind of thing with people from the Western astrology world rising up and saying, look, you can't be talking like this. This is just BS. This just isn't true. And he had to resign his position. And what's funny is that in an online discussion about that, I presented the same sort of evidence and facts that I presented last year. And then I was invited in the ISAR Journal to write a very long article in sort of rebuttal to the whole kind of thing. So it's been a very interesting thing about the zodiac. So I'm talking about it because this is big stuff that we're all sort of working through right now in the astrological world. And again, I just want to back up and say I have tolerance for anybody doing what they want to do. If you're doing astrology, that's great. But you can't just say things that aren't true and confuse people. You're free to use the systems that you want to use, but you have to have tolerance. And to say things like the sidereal zodiac is a mistake. Again, this is what some of the fanatical Vedic astrologers were saying. And it's just not true or helpful. And so that kind of stuff just doesn't have any place, you know?
And I'll say this, all everybody needs to do is take a star chart app, stick it in the sky. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Go look and see. If you think you're right now, if you had a baby that's born and, oh, it's going to be a Leo, blah, blah, blah. Okay. You look at it right now. Look where the sun is. Look where all these planets are right now. Cancer. You know, so Vedic is a sign behind, and you can see it in the sky. Sagittarius, Saturn is not in Capricorn. You can see it clear per the NASA data, right? You can see it in the Saturn.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm sorry, were you done?
No, I'm done. Go
No, but the thing I was going to say is that now some will dismiss that. Will say, well, but that's just astronomy. That's not astrology. We've now become more sophisticated. No, we haven't become sophisticated. So the alternative to finding the precise location is to project the seasons on the sun in the northern hemisphere into the sky. That's more precise. According to who? That's not more precise. I'm sorry, but it's not. And the point of the matter is, too, is when you go back in and look, because this is what I've done, and I have I have a big article that's going to come out that I've been sort of finishing. But when you go back and look, even in the early Western astrology documents that propound or that propose to use the Western astrology or to use the tropical zodiac, it's in a book called Tetrabiblos by Ptolemy. Even Ptolemy, it's not even definitive. It's not even definite that that's what he was intending, because he also describes the signs sidereally. In fact, the whole thing where he's describing the signs is sidereally. Then he makes a comment that we should start Aries when we have the vernal equinox. But again, we don't even have the original text. We don't even have Tetrabiblos when at the time that it was written by Ptolemy. And all of the Greek astrologers back then, they weren't using tropical zodiac. So even the whole idea that the Greeks used it, they didn't use it. They didn't start using it until it went to Babylon. It was the earliest translations we have of Tetrabiblos are in Arabic. And from the 9th century, then it was re-imported into Italy. So we don't even have the original versions of Tetrabiblos. And again, you never hear, I'll just get to the last thing. I know it's a bit, but you always hear the skeptic arguments against the Indian tradition. Well, this. You never hear any of the skeptic arguments against the Greek tradition, especially it's so flimsy. I mean, especially like this whole thing of Tetrabiblos. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong, because what has happened since then is there's a whole tradition of astrology that grew up around Western astrology, around using the tropical zodiac. It works, especially in Western astrology. But the whole system is used to interpret the whole system of Western astrology, especially now, is geared around interpreting the tropical zodiac calculation. But if you look at Western astrology now, it bears no resemblance to when it began back then. When you look at Indian astrology, it's practiced exactly the same way for that reason, because it hasn't changed. It still uses the same sky, the same calculations. So again, to then come and say, oh, well, no, we're going to do everything and practice it this way, but we're not going to calculate the sky that way. At some point, it just starts to say, all right, well, how does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're going to hold up this book. We're going to hold up, this book and say, here's the book, but I'm not going to calculate it the way it says to calculate it. Right. I'm going to do everything else, but I'm not going to calculate the chart the same way. At some point, it's just like, and based on stuff that's not really accurate. So if people want to do it, that's fine, but there you go.
Right.
But this is eclipse time, and so again, it's fascinating to me that it started when we had the eclipse last year in Magha in Leo, right? Mm-hmm. Now it's in Aslesha, which is another one of these transformative nakshatras. Then we had the one in Aquarius, and at that same time, there was another big thing that came out about the zodiacs, which again is pretty, pretty amazing. And I thought I would probably release my article now. So anyway.
Yeah, that's exciting.
I'm glad you talked about it because it's real stuff. And last thing that's really funny is when I was at UAC, David Palmer, Leo King.
Yeah, I follow him. I've been watching him forever. I watched your interview too.
Yeah, David's great. But again, it was the same thing. And again, even before you and I got to talk, people don't see what's behind the scenes, but I didn't plan on talking about this. Just like when David called me over, he's like, "Hey, Sam, you want to talk?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he just dove right into it.
Yeah.
He just dove right into it. It was like, okay, finally I got somebody here who can explain all this or who can talk about it like this or who's researched all this. And he couldn't wait to start going, yeah, that doesn't make sense that you would do that. I'm like, okay, right.
Well, he's funny. Like he and we've had many conversations before, like back in the days, and we used to have like debates. And I would be like, he would be like, "You're Sagittarius rising, you're Virgo, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, no. And we would just have we just had to stop like talking about astrology because we got used to get intense. But anyway, but now I see him. He's lucky he's a double Leo. So he's a Leo both ways. Those people that turn into their ascendant stays the same, like Donald Trump, like David. Yeah, like him. They're lucky. My whole chart changes, so.
And so you saw the video that we did at UAC.
Yeah.
And you saw how, I didn't really know. It was totally, we didn't even talk about what we were going to talk about. He just wanted to talk. And so, but yeah, and look, here's the thing is when I started talking about all of that, it's hard to not come off as being disrespectful of people because it's people that are saying things. But I don't have any lack of respect for people that are doing things. But at some point you just have to speak the truth. But the truth of the matter is I didn't really get a lot of hate for it at all. Most of the people were so glad that somebody was speaking out with facts and coming out with facts and speaking the truth. And, I wish it didn't hurt some people's feelings, the 5 or 6 astrologers that were saying other things or whatever, but that's just the way it is. And I'm sorry that happened that way. But again, that didn't happen because of me. I didn't start saying all this stuff. I'm not coming out attacking people. I'm just sort of defending the truth. Yeah. But the point is that seeing the enthusiasm and seeing that people are happy that the truth is being stood up for, because part of what really bothered me, and it still kind of bothers me a little bit, is how much most Vedic astrologers, and I mean the famous ones and all that, see, I can kind of piss everybody off a little bit. But but it kind of bugged me and still kind of bugs me how people wouldn't stand up for it. It's like, is no one ever going to say anything about this ever?
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, I'm going to come out and speak up. And I did speak up, and like hardly no one except Joni came on my channel and had a conversation, but hardly no one else would, no, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to have a conversation about, and again, I didn't want to be controversial, but just talk about how you use the sidereal zodiac or just to talk about it. No one really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So I was like, God, where's the integrity here? Again, I don't mean to be offensive, but that's how it felt to me. I'm over it now as far as like the big thing, but it was kind of weird last year in that sense. Yeah. Just trying to like say, look, folks.
Right.
There is a tradition. There is history. It does matter. We can't just make things up and confuse everybody.
You talked about it on KRS too, didn't you? I think you did.
Yeah. And even when I talked about it on his channel, it's like I even told him, I said, no, I'm not all angry at people or whatever. So, we'll keep it understated. And literally, as soon as the subject came up, he started going like, man, and he started ranting and raving. It's kind of like, all right, well, but again, I have respect for everybody, and I'm glad people are doing astrology. I don't care what system you're using. Go ahead and do it. But you have to be careful what you say, and you can't just say things that confuse everybody that aren't following their tradition. Otherwise, we don't have a science anymore. It's just a free-for-all. And I said this is one of the big problems even in the world these days, and it's shown even by these eclipses, especially right now. We're seeing a lot of this. Look, it doesn't matter which side of the issue that you're on, even when it comes to things like the news we have with the president and all, not to get into totally controversial subjects. No, all I'm saying is this. Look, I'm for everybody. I'm for the truth, and I'm for people. I think everybody is getting spun out in this weird way, and we're polarized in this tribalism, because truth is now just a total relative thing. I'm not saying my version of truth is the right one, but what I'm saying is that we live in the age of spin. We live in the age of information and disinformation, and information is weaponized, disinformation is weaponized. So there's so many things now at the disposal, and that's just a general statement.
Yeah.
Now, which side of that you're coming down on is where people tend to fight, and I'm less interested in fight than I am in calling out the truth. And people don't like when I call out the truth, as I see it, but I don't have as much of a stake in the outcomes of individuals as I do for all of us. And the biggest problem isn't that this individual is wrong or this entity is wrong. It's that those things are used to divide us now, because there's no consensus anymore. And we live in the age of spin. And just like with the thing we're talking about with the astrology. And again, it's shown even with this eclipses and Mars retrograde with Ketu aspecting Mercury retrograde. You see how the spin is really ratcheted up now in this last eclipse cycle, and all over the place. I actually said it back in January. That this was going to be a time, this whole eclipse cycle, where we're going to have to try to find a consensus reality. In the world, in this country, we definitely see it. But we're all being sort of spun out and manipulated. And even in that zodiac issue, everything looks the same. The person, the nice looking guy, the photogenic guy who seems serious and studied, has just as much authority as 1,000 years of Indian history, for example, or 2,000 years, because but I like him, so I believe him, and it's made us intellectually lazy, because the truth requires effort, but it doesn't. But opinions don't. Opinions don't require any effort whatsoever. Oh, I believe it, and that's it, because an opinion is based on a belief, which doesn't require any intellectual stamina or effort. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's such a good point, and you have to do your research. And I will say this, because I did research on both systems so much, where I stalked you on Facebook about and asked you millions of questions too when I was studying so much. And I studied astrology so much. People asked me, it was like 8 to 10 hours a day nonstop. And I can tell you, I asked every single person what time they were born, who did their chart, wherever I'd go, and it never failed. That, to me, was factual proof that the sidereal zodiac is the correct way. Was from my own study. You know what I mean? Like, from me doing it and testing it myself, not listening to what everybody said, but actually trying it and doing it.
Yeah, and especially if you connect it, if we're on that theme, especially if you connect it with the tools that are like laid out in the text.
Yes.
Again, and especially, and again, if we're going to talk about that, one of the biggest things that I wanted to bring it back to was the connection to the nakshatras and the rashis. Mm-hmm. This is the part that is so innate. It almost, like, again, without being critical, but I almost don't know how anyone could say that, Magha is in Virgo, for example.
Right.
And
it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way.
Revati is in Aries. And again,
no.
So again, when you look at this, even these theories and these ideas, when you start to dismantle it, it's like, okay, so you've come along now 2,000 years later to set us all straight. And so now we get presented with the wonderful gift of the same section of sky measured 2 different ways that have nothing to do with each other. So that's the improvement. And what is it improving? Vedic astrology works really well. It has for 2,000 years. It's worked really well. So why do I need to now do that? So the point is that, like, particularly on the level, like, for instance, the first degree of Sagittarius, like all those Gandanta points, they now go away when you don't have the zodiacs aligned, right? So there's no question that the Jeshta Mula Gandanta point between Scorpio Sagittarius, huge transition. Or right now with this eclipse, the Aslesha Leo. Yeah. I'm sorry, the Aslesha Magha, Cancer Leo. All these Gandanta points, the Revati Ashwini, these are nailed into the transformational energy of life. And I don't know how anyone could say, oh, well, they'll say, well, that's just where the nakshatra is. It's not the Rashi. Again, based on nothing, because every text says clearly that they're aligned. Yeah. So again, you can have opinions about it, but again, you would think that that because we live in the age of spin and we live in the age of misinformation, not just information, and and scrutiny and research takes effort, you would think that people would at least be able to recognize, and in fact they have, because I've really noticed that even since I started bringing out the science behind it and making it understandable, I don't really hear it so much. I don't hear so much of the uproar, you know, about it. And I think people have kind of went into their camp a little bit and been like, okay, let's keep our head down, because I also think a lot of the people that were doing that, I don't think it, I know it, those astrologers that were doing that, they took a lot of heat. And I'm sorry that happened, but at the same time, that's just the way it works. I mean, they had a lot of people showing up on their YouTube channels and otherwise giving them a hard time. And I'm sorry that happened, but I'm more sorry that it happened in the beginning. I'm more sorry that we even had to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, I was patient about it for about 10 years. I mean, I didn't say anything. I kind of just wanted it to sort of blow over, but then it just kept getting more and more. And more my students get confused. And I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, I
asked you about that. I remember. I was like, what is going on with these kids?
I remember.
Don't you use Callus software? And I was like, what is going on here? How am I a Sagittarius? Are you telling me that? And you were like, no. So
don't pay any attention to that stuff. Yeah. And so it's like, you know, again, if my main focus were just kind of doing readings and whatnot, but my main focus has been and still is teaching. I mean, I've had 120 full-time students for about 5 or 6 years doing my level 1 and level 2 certifications. And I'm constantly teaching and having to answer these questions. So my initial forays into clarifying things were just for my students. I didn't even make a big public deal about it. I was just like, look, I don't want to get into some big thing. I don't have a career based on fighting with people or whatever. And I didn't really want to do it. I did it mainly for my students. And again, a lot of people really appreciate it. But then it just got to be too much everywhere. Like the bloodstream just sort of, everybody confused. So anyway.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into this eclipse we have coming up. And this, I think this one is my personal opinion, just because it's in Aslacia, you know,
yeah.
And this is to me, a very controversial nakshatra. Okay. Because like I look at this nakshatra and I know there's positive and negative with everything, but you know, when I study a lot, and we're not going to go here too much, I would say, but we might, who knows? You know,
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said we might not go here, but we might go here. Oh. Who knows? I said, when I look at all the politicians' charts, you know, I get into that and into all the conspiracies, and there is a certain side that has a heavy Aslacia energy, right? There's a lot different than, you know, some of the other sides. So I've noticed that in a lot of the charts, and we don't have their times, but you can see how certain things pan out.
Have you ever looked at the connections between Michael Cohen and Trump and all those planets that Cohen has in Trump's 12th house? I was going to do a video about it.
I have not looked at Cohen's chart. I've looked at Mueller's chart. I've looked at Sessions' chart. I've looked at Comey's chart, but I haven't got to him yet.
Yeah, if I could share I know I don't have that we don't have the screen sharing for me.
You sure you can't do it?
That's fine. Let me try again. Share screen. No, it says host disabled screen sharing.
Maybe I did that on the whole settings. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's probably what it is.
Find it.
That's fine. But anyway, I actually looked at, just because I wanted to see the relationship that Trump has to Manafort and to Cohen. It's pretty easy. You can see it. It's in drastic contrast. But Manafort has 4 planets in Pisces, which is Trump's 8th house. And Michael Cohen has 4 planets in Cancer, which is Trump's 12th house.
Yep.
So this is a big reason why, of course, with the Manafort thing, the 8th house is fear. I mean, literally 4 planets from Leo, right? And then fear, which is the 8th house, and, you know, and destruction, so to speak. And then Cohen has those 4 planets in Trump's 12th house, which 12th house is about secrets. Michael Cohen was holding all Trump's secrets all these years. And again, you can, I'm not even being judgmental, just looking at it astrologically. And I know I do have views about it, but I also just make it for astrological scholarship. So like you can see and study, whether you think this one's lying or that one's lying, you still see the issue. And again, and of course, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Cohen, what can you give me his birthday? I can put it in.
Yeah. So Michael Cohen is August 25th. 1966.
Okay, and we don't have his time, right?
No, I have a feeling that he might be Scorpio, late Scorpio, because he's Trump's little baby. No, I'm kidding.
Do you think he could be a Virgo or a Leo?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a lot to speculate. When I looked at the dashas, and also look, especially if I move the ascendant around late Scorpio, where Trump has his K2 moon, I thought that would be sort of interesting. Also, because Cohen was a Democrat for a long time, so that shows he's pretty smart. I'm kidding. No. I'm just kidding you.
We'll have a nice debate about that.
I'm just joking. No, but the dashas actually lined up pretty well with the Scorpio. But aside from that, you can just look at the arrangement of planets and you can see.
Oh my God. Well, so 8/25/1966, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter.
Pull up the chart so people can see it too.
Sorry. I'm sitting here just looking at it myself.
Yeah, I know. Come on, Heidi. You're broadcasting live. Okay.
I always forget.
Okay. Yeah. So bring up Trump's too. Can you scroll between the two? Because this is his. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. And if you look at Manafort, it's the same, but it's in Pisces. So again, from Trump's ascendant in Leo, you see Cohen is the keeper of Trump's secrets. And again, this isn't judging anything. This is just astrology, flat out. So if you scroll back between, you can see that Trump has Venus, Saturn in the 12th. And Cohen is the keeper of all of those secrets, and especially those secrets with women. So look at what's come out. Look what's come out in this eclipse. This eclipse right in Trump's 12th house, right on Cohen's, those secrets that Cohen was holding for Trump. And what happens? Cohen starts to flip, and you start seeing more secrets that he's been holding about women. They come out now on the eclipse. I said this a few weeks ago, that this eclipse was going to bring out more of Trump's problems with women. I said it back in the one in January as well, before the Stormy Daniels thing blew up at all, because I could see that that eclipse was happening right before it was.
She's in jail. Do you know that right now?
Who?
Stormy, for being in a human trafficking ring.
Yeah.
So I don't think I believe anything she says either, but I'm not saying she didn't do that.
Well, without getting in, and again, I'm not even getting in, you're getting into like what we believe about. I'm looking at the astrology and the energy that's coming out.
Yeah. Okay.
So aside from that.
Yeah.
So this is where it turns into like, so I can just talk about the astrology and what it shows, which is regardless of what you think of her and this and that, Michael Cohen is a guy that held a lot of Trump's secrets. Simple. And it's corroborated now because, again, he's got all these planets in Trump's 12th house of secrets, especially with other women and those other sort of stories. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, definitely. It definitely is activated there for sure.
And it's coming out now. If you saw Manafort's chart, it's the same, except that you have the planets are in the 8th house in Paul Manafort's chart.
And Mueller.
Yeah, I haven't looked at his chart. I think I looked at it once.
Yeah, oh, there we go.
Oh, there's Manafort. Yeah, see all of them in the 8th house.
Wait,
so again.
Yeah, there's Manafort.
Yeah, so I was just looking at the relationship that these two people have with Trump. Like it's basically like a relationship astrology reading.
Right.
And so someone should have advised Trump, literally, don't trust this guy with your secrets and be careful because this guy could be very dangerous to you. That's Manafort. And because 8th house is danger, where something is very dangerous to us, our survival, it could be our killer, our murderer, the thing that destroys us, the 8th house, and also the one who's keeping the secrets. It's like, be careful, keeping all the secrets. And literally, even if you think, it's not a matter of Trump being innocent or guilty or whatever. Michael Cohen was secretly taping Trump. It's like, this guy is secretly taping you, and now he's exposing your secrets. He's exposed all these tapes. So again, it's just fascinating astrologically to see the synastry.
Yeah, no, it is for sure. Yeah, and I think it's just fascinating. Even when you look at, I looked at him with Putin's chart and stuff, and you could see why they would get along. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I have a feeling that Manafort is Capricorn ascendant. He looks Capricorn. He looks like a crocodile or something. Just because he's so he's stiff. He has that kind of stiff. He looks very Capricornish, like very rigid. And it would make sense to have all those planets in the 3rd and have his ruling planet in the 8th. And I had a feeling, I have an instinct about Michael Cohen as a Scorpio or maybe a Cancer ascendant, one of those two, because he kind of has a Scorpio-looking face, especially the bottom of his face.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that. Or also Cancer because he's just kind of a palooka, like, I don't know, that those planets in the first.
Yeah.
But he looks kind of watery. But do you want to bring up the eclipse chart? Oh. So what do you make of this? So we have all these planets in a Slesha. So what were you going to tell me about what you thought?
I just think this is like definitely going to trigger. Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of things that are going to be uncovered. I've noticed this just with eclipse. Things come to Mars, K2, Capricorn, secrets. Why?
We're already seeing it.
Mars, K2. I had all the secrets in the world when I was younger. I mean, I'll admit it. You know what I mean? I have Mars and K2 in my first house. If anybody knows it, it's me. Okay. So for me, it's like I watch things go down and, all the things coming out and all the accidents and the fires. I mean, I was saying this, like I sleep with a fire extinguisher by my bed. I've done this for years. Mars, K2, right? Look at all the fire. Like, and if you just look at these patterns and there's fires everywhere, accidents, like it is. I listen to police scanners all day and watch the transits with them. And I'm telling you, it's out of control, and road rage, and myself included. You have no idea what's been going on with me on the road. I'm surprised I'm still here.
Yeah.
So it's like, and it's just intense, and Cancer is a very intense emotional sign. So people's emotions are getting triggered, egos, emotions. Aslacia is not, my sister's a double Aslacia. Okay. And I'm going to tell you, she can be real snippy. And I'm saying that in the nicest way possible. Right.
Yeah. Is there a reason why I'm not on the screen? I'm just wondering, is that just me?
It's when I think when maybe we talk, it just.
Oh, okay. That's fine. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, that's fine. But
now, when you talk, you'll be on it.
But it doesn't show up to me when I talk. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to make sure I'm still here because I didn't see it. Anyway, but yeah. I mean, here's the thing that I talk about with the Slesha, and I just did a YouTube update on this. The more kind of spiritual qualities of it. And tomorrow I'm actually going to do a more kind of sort of current events, thing. First of all, obviously what you're saying is true. And eclipses in general bring out secrets, and we're already seeing it. I mean, we're already seeing so much come out that we didn't really know. I mean, like we're looking for clues of, this last month or so, like it seemed like it was 2 months ago since Trump went to, when was it? When he went to Helsinki, when he went to, first it was the NATO meeting. I mean, it seems so long ago. That was before the last eclipse. That was a little over a month ago, or a little less than a month ago. But look at how much has happened since then. Like it's been so much accelerated, like, polarizing and stuff coming out. And oh my God, it was shocking to see him standing next to Putin and acting that way. Regardless of what you think of it, it was shocking to see. That's changed a whole lot of other things. That's like everything's different after that. Blah, 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 so, and then his longtime lawyer taped him and flips on him. And it's just like, how much more can come out that we haven't been seeing and again, we're so used to it now. This is kind of what I was saying before too, about we live in this age of spin, misinformation, and this velocity and acceleration of things that we're just normalized to and numb to. And, not to mention the other thing that came out was the 12 indictments of the Russians. Again, regardless of what you think of it, it was a huge kind of thing that shifted, especially within the system, that really kind of forced a situation where they almost said, well, Trump shouldn't meet with Putin now, or he shouldn't do this now, whatever. Anyway, so many things that compel us to either investigate it more or go, well, I don't know, that takes a lot of work, so I'm just going to believe what my tribe says and my spin, again, for better or worse or whatever. Maybe the people who just digest everything, the government and the mainstream or the tradition says, they don't want to look further. And the people that just digest and believe what Trump says and the other, they don't want to look further. We don't want to look further. And I think the people that do look further start to see beyond the tribalism. At least that's what it is for me. I feel like I actually, I moved to San Diego. I lived in San Francisco for a long time. Living in San Diego, it's probably more Trump voters than there are liberals, right? It's Southern California. It's also 10 miles from Mexico. So,
Yeah.
but the point is, most people, I don't even say most people, but everybody, when people meet each other, people aren't thinking this kind of stuff one-to-one. This stuff comes when we get in our little kind of box and internet and our kind of sort of bubble, and then we start trying to figure the world out or something. But it's like we have so much at our grasp, but we don't have the intellectual fortitude to actually figure things out. And then we get divided rather than keeping our eye on the bigger picture, which doesn't even have to do with any of those things. Right. It has to do with the corrupt system. Because I think the biggest problem is that the whole system, the world system, is awash in corrupt money. Money is driving everything, and we ain't got it, and all of them do. And that's the problem, when they love to have us fighting amongst ourselves.
For control.
Right. It's the money grab. It's the money grab, people. It's the money grab. Stop looking at Trump doing all his stuff, head fakes or whatever is going on. Stop looking at the backlash to it. Stop looking at all that and start watching where all the money's going and where it's going from. It ain't going to us. It's going to weapons manufacture and all these people that already have it, who want to concentrate, gobble up and keep it and keep us. And that's where the stuff is going in the bigger picture. At least that's my feeling.
Well, I am in real estate, so I'm not going to be complaining on that one. So I'm going to be, I have a different opinion on that. And I do think, and we're allowed to have different opinions. It's not like I'm going to ever hate Sam because we don't have the same views. And that's the thing.
How's being in real? No, I mean, then that's fine. And
I think we should be able to talk about that kind of stuff. I think it's healthy too. Like,
go ahead. What is the difference that they're in real estate not have to say about?
Well, I just think because I don't think I think the money and everything, the economy is doing better. I think he is doing better.
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay.
You're still acting like I'm not even talking about the president, my friend.
Okay.
I'm not talking about anything. I'm saying I'm talking about on a meta level. Of course the economy is doing well. Yeah, I'm doing well.
Yeah.
I bet I made more money than you. I'm kidding.
Yeah. Okay.
No. I'm not talking tribal politics right now. I'm saying all of us, wherever we come down on these issues.
Yeah.
That he's good, he's not good. I'm saying, put all that aside. I'm not talking about that. When people interact, we're interacting as people. We have the same needs. And what's going on is all of that would have you and I arguing about whether he's good or he's bad. All of that is kind of like a head fake so that we're not paying attention to the fact that the system is extracting all of the wealth from us. And we're still getting some of it, but it's disappearing.
Right.
It's all about concentrating more power, wealth, and all of that away from regular people.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
That's the world we live in.
Yeah, that's the world we live in. And that's what we need to watch. And again, now we live in this age of spin where it's easier than ever to get us chasing this soap opera than it is to keep so that we're distracted rather than paying attention to what unites us. So if we can be carved up and divided by whatever it is, then they keep their foothold on power, which is really all they want. And that's built into the system. It's built into business, politics, international affairs, war, all the globalism, the tribal. This is why we see this rise in tribalism, both in our country, and also in the world. Brexit and nationalism on the rise everywhere, and all of this, and all these authoritarian regimes rising up everywhere because they want to concentrate this power in these small areas and then link it up in a larger way.
Right. So what do you suggest we do about it, Sam? Like, what do you think is the best advice?
Well, again, the first advice that I always have for everyone and everything is to first understand it. It takes enough effort to explain it and to understand it without people shouting at everybody. And I'll admit that I've at times not contributed the best. I'm going to try to be less inflammatory, I guess, at times, because when I see what is going on, not just with the president's, I guess, behavior or signaling, but with the response to it, all of it bugs me, frankly. The left bugs me as much as the right, frankly, because all of it is just there now as the big head fake. So the point is, I think the first thing that we all can do, in my opinion, is to not lose that awareness, is to keep our eye on that. What are we not paying attention to while all of that soap opera is going on and mainstream media and alternative media is making money? What are we not paying attention to, and not lose a connection to each other and to grassroots, as far as culturally, this is a cultural thing, is to not allow that, to lead to hatred, and to remain curious and to investigate and to look into things ourselves. And literally, when we don't know something, admit that we don't know it. Because again, one of the biggest problems I see it with astrology, I see it with world politics, with all kinds of stuff, is people form opinions about things they have no idea about, and their opinion is more entrenched. It's more entrenched than someone who actually understands it.
And that's same with religion. I mean, quite honestly, that's how religion is too. It can be,
How so?
Because I believe, like, sometimes, like in a Christian, right? It's forced. You think it's that way, and it's like, I don't know. And you can get really, like, you hear anything. Most Christians think every other religion's going to hell, period. So that's, how do they think? And I was very Christian growing up and went to Christian schools. And I was like, what about all these other people? How are they just going to go to hell? That doesn't make any logistical sense. We're a small population compared to all the rest of the world, So it's just something that makes me think of that.
Yeah, so I think that before we get into believing things and believing, a conspiracy theory one way or another, or a very non-authoritative view put forth, we should remain neutral. Yeah. Again, one of the biggest problems is we develop a like or a dislike. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I'll just say this in a very specific way. I think one of the biggest reasons why, I see so much hatred for, like, Hillary Clinton and the Clintons and all of that, just starting the conversation with anybody who, quote, likes Trump. It's they hate Clinton, or then they hate Trump so much that they don't listen to anything and see any good that he could be doing. And it just completely blinds us. It's tamasic. It's called tamasic energy. And so then we make the object of our projection either perfect, who could never make a mistake, or horrible, who could never do anything right. And it's all just, again, this is where the tribalistic nonsense begins. Trump can certainly do good. I'm cheering for him to be successful in many ways, because I live in this world. I don't want to see him screw everything up,
right.
But again, when I call out things like, it's dangerous for him to just go, like, meet with this dictator, this Kim Jong-un or whatever, and then strut around like he succeeded and didn't do anything or whatever, then people give me a hard time because, oh, how dare you say this about our leader? He's blah. And again, or if and say, well, yeah, all right, well then even, maybe that can have a great effect, but it still could be what it is. It's like there's no meeting point. Like, I would love to see all of that work out. I would love to see the relationship with Russia work out or whatever, but that doesn't mean you do this, or it doesn't mean that anything else that could be said is wrong. Like, you can't say anything one way or the other because there's a entrenched camp who has so much, and then the other side too. Like I say, there's things that Trump could do, that has done, that are fine and that could certainly work out. Well, no, it's not. Well, of course it is. And we should hope for that. But again, so just remaining intellectually curious about these things instead of being so, manipulated by spin. And again, that's a big part. When I look at the eclipse, especially like when I look at this nakshatra of Aslesha, it literally means entwining and entangling. Mm-hmm. And it's in the sign of Cancer, which is, the sign of Cancer is, this, I don't know what that means. Okay. I'm sorry, it's in the sign of Cancer, which is a sattvic sign, which has to do with finding the goodness and finding the highest rather than suspicion or other kinds of things. So the sign of Cancer is like, it's like a mother's love.
Okay, so but how does that work when it's in a Aslesha? Because they have the sign of Cancers, but then we go to the nakshatras. Because do you think that's the Aslesha? Because I don't believe that. Not how I've seen it pan out. It's not like the nurturer, you know. I just haven't. I haven't seen it work out that way 100%.
Okay, so 100%. So here's the thing. Everything is a potential.
Of course, yes.
But here's the way I explain this, and here's the way I see it, and I understand it without a doubt. And this is where the nakshatras and the rashis are aligned. Mm-hmm. Aslesha is that section of Cancer that's like the mother's entwining, entangling embrace. Was your mother tangled up in you? Was your mother's love like entwined around you? I'm asking you.
She wasn't, no, she wasn't like up in my mix all the time. And she loved
Okay,
me.
so as far as things in her life.
Yeah, she's, to a certain degree, but I'm distant from everybody, and that's just me.
Okay, so let me just speak in general then.
Okay, don't use me for scenarios on that. Yeah, go ahead.
Cancer is a sign of like the mother's love, or like of selfless love that we have, like the selfless love that we have for our children or for our pets or for other things. Selfless love, not desire love. We don't even know what love is most of the time. We think love is this romantic craziness that we get in with another person. That's a contractual kind of desire-filled love. It's not pure love. Pure love is like the love we have that doesn't want anything in return. So when you were a little baby, let's say, not when you were grown up and you developed an adult relationship, but probably when you were a little baby and you needed to be nurtured, your mother's love was totally entangled and entwined in you, and anything you wanted, they were there. This is the way a mother's love works, or like the way we are with our pets, that pure love, where we're totally tangled up and entwined and enmeshed with that object of our love. That's pure love that doesn't ask for anything in return. The mother doesn't resent the fact that the baby is screaming and crying and needing its diaper changed and all of that stuff, because the mother's love is unconditional and they're entwined in it. And in fact, that kind of love, that kind of pure love, leads us straight to the heart, straight to the purity of what's in our heart, what our heart truly is. Because our heart is not all of these emotions. That's the heart disturbed by our desires. The pure love in our heart mixed with our desires create emotions. And we tend to identify with the emotions and not with the purity of the heart. So Aslesha is that potential to go deep, but it's also a toxic potential if we're not entangled up and entwined in pure love. So when we get tied up in our desires, when people have planets in Aslesha, the main thing I tell them is, this is a sign of purity, pure love. So you need to find something that you can pour that pure love into, like children, pets, something like that, because desires and your interactions with others, like with your peers, with your siblings, with other people that you want something from, it can tend to create a lot of emotional creates a lot of emotional attachment, entanglement, frustration, and it's a lot of toxic emotions can be there. Toxic emotions. Emotions is not the purity of the heart. They're different things. Again, we don't even know what the heart is, especially in the West. We think the heart is emotions, and it's not. In Indian thinking and in Sanatana Dharma, it's the purity of love. It's not emotion. It's different. When you study yoga, you learn this. You have the vrittis and the samskaras on the surface of the mind, but underneath is the buddha, is the manas, the pure consciousness. That's pure feeling. That's much deeper than all of that. So Aslesha is that part of Cancer that connects us, but it's deep. So if we're on the surface and something is in Aslesha, then it's trying to bring this surface power or this depth to the surface, and it creates a lot of drama.
Yeah,
that can be very toxic. One of the things I've seen with Aslesha, and I'll say this, is it's more than any other nakshatra or section of the sky that I've seen, it's the place where where a person is prone to suicide, especially when things get to the very end of Aslesha. I know 4 or 5 people that have committed suicide. Almost all of them either had ascendant or something in a Slesha, or there was a transit through a Slesha at that time, because it's that point where we're so tangled up in our emotion that there's nothing separate from it. It's where we're totally tangled up in the heart. And if we're tangled up in the pure love of the heart, that's called devotion. And that's what we want. If we're tangled up in the emotion of the moment, then it's horrible. Then it's insanity. It can be like emotional insanity, because we're trying to have some temporary emotion be this eternal beauty, and it never is. So a person has enormous potential with the Slesha, but only when they connect to the purity of the heart.
Yeah, makes sense.
Does that make more sense?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense.
And the previous nakshatra of Pushya, which is where Rahu is, that's the part of Cancer that has to do with the teats of the cow's udder. It's the breasts, literally. Mm-hmm. And so again, this is how the nakshatras line up. And again, when you're looking at Siddhartha Zodiac, Pushya is in Leo. Okay. The teats of the cow, the suckling, the nurturing, the mother's milk is in Leo. No. It's in Cancer, right? Of course, that makes sense. So, but again, one of the things you want to understand is the guna of the sign is really important. It's a foundational principle in Vedic astrology. And so we have the tamas, rajas, and sattva guna, which has to do with purity, which is sattva, desire, which is rajas, and then protection and will and stress, which is tamas. And so, Cancer is a sattvic sign, and those nakshatras have that sattvic intention. So the nakshatra of Pushya, the one before, is that purity to just selflessly feed and nurture. And then the next one is where, after we selflessly feed and nurture, we become attached. That love in our heart, like the mother, let's say, breastfeeding the baby, it's like this bond, this attachment, this entanglement, this entwining happens.
Yeah.
And so when it's on that level, or it doesn't have to be with with the level of another person, it can also be with your God and your guru and your higher spiritual teachings. Huh?
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Yeah.
A lot of cancers can be very religious, especially Pushya.
Not just religious, but religion is like the surface of spirituality. It's kind of like emotion was the surface of the heart. Religion is kind of like the surface of spirituality, because spirituality it's non-denominational.
Agree. Okay, so but what I'm saying is religious, meaning because my channel came from a conspiracy channel. Okay, so most of my people are truth seekers that were very religious out of fear. You know what I mean? So they're not like the people in California in yoga class, like most Australia. Like, I have some of those, I'm sure, but a lot of mine are very like truth seekers, period. And so I noticed a lot of things. A lot of my clients come from, it was hard for them to get an astrology reading, because they thought it was for the devil. So that's, I noticed those trends because I have a whole set of different charts that I noticed that Cancer, especially Pushya, lots of Pushya and Pisces, even Pisces, can be very religious.
Right. And again, all I'm saying is that religion is the surface, but what someone is looking for with religion is devotion.
Yeah.
Just like what someone's looking for with emotions is love, pure love in their heart. That's not situational, or that's not conditional. See, what happens is we have these pure energetic forces. The moon is the pure force of the heart, and it comes through the sign of Cancer, right? We're looking to connect with that pure force, that pure loving wisdom that's underneath. But then we identify with the surface, because we don't know who we really are. We identify with the form of it. So we try to find that pure love in our heart through some changing situation or person, and it just creates a lot of emotion that's painful, right? Same is true then. And then the higher version of that, like the meta version of that, is God. So we try to connect. We're told that God is in some ceremony or worship or form. So, someone who has a lot of planets in a devotional sign, especially Cancer and Pisces are quite devotional, they're going to resonate first with some kind of religious belief, because that's what they've been told, that's what God is. And and so they're going to naturally be receptive to belief. But it doesn't take much, because look, I've, maybe, we're a little bit different with what we're doing right now with this channel or that channel, but I've been talking to people forever. I've been doing 200 readings a year for about, 10 or 12 years. Plenty of them start with some religious idea, or, their devotion is, takes a form of religion. But then once you hear pure truth spoken, like this kind of truth that says, well, but underneath a religion is that devotion in your heart, that resonates with anyone, because that's a universal truth.
Yeah,
It's non-denominational. So people who are religious, you can always find the deeper truth in the surface. But often, if you're coming from the place of the deeper truth, the surface will be counterfeit. Like if someone is already really connected to the devotion in their heart, once they see religion being used to exploit or to abuse people, they have no interest in it. Yeah. Because they're already coming from a deeper source. They already have a devotional source. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So these are a lot of the potentials of this eclipse for sure. And, the other thing is that it started last year. It started like in last September or so, when Rahu first went into Cancer. Right after that, and then Jupiter went into Libra. These two things happened like within a month or so of each other. This is when we really started to see a lot of the Me Too and the women's and the kind of, like a real focus on women's issues, especially, which we've seen so much of. Even we just had all the politics with the, all of the political races and whatnot that have been happening since then. Women have been very much on the rise, I guess you would say, as far as the, paying attention to these more nurturing qualities of the world. That Rahu going through Leo, especially when Jupiter was there, it was like patriarchy on steroids for a year and a half. And as soon as Rahu went into Cancer last year, we started seeing, and I said it at the time, it's going to be a more of a reestablishment of the divine feminine in a spiritual sense, or just more connection to seeing how we pay attention to women's issues, these kinds of things. So we've also seen that culturally, globally, somewhat. So that's also something that I've definitely been mentioning at this time.
Yeah.
And
anything else, anything else weather-wise or anything that we need to look out for?
Well, definitely we saw this. We've seen here in California, not just California, but as soon as Mars and Ketu joined, we had all that. We had that lava flow going on in Hawaii. That the volcano, very disruptive, and we're seeing the record hot weather everywhere, right? I don't even want to say it as an astrologer, because you astrologer, people always give you a hard time when you mention something that's already happened. All you astrologers are such experts when something's already happened.
No, I know, but this has been weird, and we've been saying that, it has just been weird. The weather is not normal.
No, the extreme heat. And again, you can see Mars, Ketu. Yeah. Look, and again, sometimes people want to look for some sign that astrology is working or that it's real. Mars is closer than it's been, and that it'll be for the next couple of 100 years. It's joined the South Node, it's exalted, and it's been this massive heat wave all over the globe. Not to mention fires and all. Hello, Mars is right there. So we're going to see more of it.
And then again, gone on to drowning. The drownings have been everywhere. I'm talking
drowning. Yeah,
I live on the Bay, and I'm going to say that there's people are going down all over the place.
Yeah, I was about to say that definitely there's a potential for the water, and I also think we might see some, especially over the next few days. We might see, again, I said this about a Slesha suicide. Maybe there'll be a prominent suicide. The last time when we had the thing with Bourdain and the woman Kate Spade, that was right when the moon just passed over that K2 Mars, when that week that happened. That wasn't an eclipse yet, because I think it was in April or something. But so a Slesha, definitely it has that quality. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's prominent suicide or two or something like that. And people, I'm also saying this to people who, as we get close by the, at the end of the week, or even now as we get closer to this eclipse, suicide is it's a terrible moment that we just sort of can't get through. I've known a couple of people who took their life. And I lived in a place where people used to take their life by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. I know 2 people who did. And I know, you hear these stories about people when they try to do it, they regret it as soon as it happened and they're glad they survived. And I'm sure that one of my friends who did it, he was actually a friend of mine. The moment he jumped, he was like, oh my God, what have I just done? But it's too late. So I think those moments of suicide are these terrible moments that we just can't get through. We just can't find any hope. And again, Aslesha, because we're so tangled up in it and we're so disassociated, disconnected from our heart at that moment, we just can't see beyond it. It's like the mother who's so tangled up in the love of her child, and then what happens if the child dies, or the fear that the child would die, or some kind of thing, like you don't think you can survive it. So when people who have Aslesha in their chart, they require a little bit of awareness of that. But the thing is they also have enormous potential that most of us don't have to connect with the heart. I know many people with Aslesha. And their capacity, this is the thing to also understand when I say astrology is a portrait of capacity. They have the capacity maybe that you and I don't have. I got my moon in Libra, it's in Vishaka. Boy, it takes a lot for me to really get down to that pure love. There's so much going on. But people like Aslesha and the moon in Cancer or the moon in Pisces, they're very much vibrating. That's what you have. You have that moon in Pisces. So you have that very devotional nature.
Nice. Yeah, I can be devotional. I can. Yeah, it's true.
I know you can. I know you can. I know you have a natural capacity. But again, one of the things, it's a capacity. And if it's not channeled towards something pure, then it can be a lot of emotion, a lot of drama, because the feelings go so deep. Because the feelings are so.
I'm just like, I'd rather just be alone, and that's, I think, because I don't have any planets with it. Like, it's just easier for me to be alone.
Right, because there's a antecedent to the sentence.
No,
because
I know what people are.
No, let me help you. There you go. Because I don't trust anybody. There was it. Because being with other people, what's the rest?
is a challenge.
Yeah, and it hurts so much. See, this is what happens. This is why I say astrology is.
I have been, but I know, because I've heard a lot of people too.
I'm sure you have. This is what we do. That's not. Yeah. They're not separate, and it's good that you're honest. But they're not separate. When we get hurt, we hurt others, and it hurts us.
Yeah.
This is conditional love. This is the conditional love I was talking about.
Yeah.
It's not love. That's not what we learn. We don't learn love in relationship. In relationship with others, like a romantic relationship, we learn other things. We learn how to compromise, how to play fair, how to not lose ourselves, how to maintain our integrity and compromise, what our no compromise zones are, what our boundaries are. That's actually what we're learning in a relationship. But instead, we lose ourselves in it. We project onto them. We try to find true love in a romantic relationship and wind up hurt and disappointed and acting like a monster. because true love is not found in romantic relationships. Again, we find compromise and other things. It's found in purity and things like devotion, and especially like devotion to God. Again, it's very easy for, like, when I talked about pure love before, talking about Cancer, immediately, like when we have something to take care of, like a mother's love for a child, when they're suckling the child, if we're taking care of a pet, when we're just giving love selflessly, that's what the moon actually wants. That's what the heart actually wants. So you should get a pet. You should get something to take care of so that channel to that pure love in your heart is always being nurtured. Scorpios are great with just giving selfless love and pure love, because it's that water sign, especially because your moon's also in Pisces, right?
Yes. Yep.
And so relationships bring up a whole other thing. And I'm sure that's a whole other thing, but that's not the pure love. In fact, that's the surface emotional love.
Makes sense. Yeah.
I'll say this last thing, and it's actually somewhat related when we're talking about the Gunas. When we were supposed to meet
Yeah.
in Annapolis, and
there was a shooting too.
oh gosh, oh my gosh,
Remember that?
do I remember it? Look, I'll tell this first, but it wasn't just there was a shooting. Heidi, you have to understand something. I hadn't been back to Maryland since 1998. 20 years.
Wow.
I had not been back to Maryland in 20 years. I'm on the plane flying to DC, and I see shooting in Annapolis. I'm like, holy shit. When have you ever heard Annapolis in the news? And it was a mile and a half from my hotel. I'm thinking, what have I done? It's terrible.
I know, God.
But besides that, which was, I had another strange experience about that, but I wanted to talk about the interaction that we had where I said and the astrological connection, because it's really funny and it's something that I think you'll like. So I was just talking about the guna of Cancer, right? Which is about sattva. So sattva guna is about, it's very open and trusting and devotional. Just like when we're devoted to something and we trust it, we're open, right? We're very open and we're very trusting. Then there's rajasic, which is like fun, emotional, a lot of activity, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's tamasic, which is protective, aware that there might be danger, concentrating and making sure that they're safe. All of it is powerful. All of them, they're all powers. There is no judgment, because you can be open and trusting and be taken advantage of. You can be, there is no judgment in them. They're all superpowers. But Scorpio, they have the superpower of tamas, which is not just self-preservation, but this like resiliency and this courage to face difficulty, but to also be aware of potential difficulty. And what happens is that in the situation where I contacted you and said, oh, okay, so I'll be coming, and you're like, okay, and then you didn't hear from me for, 3 weeks or so.
Yeah, a month.
But listen to what happened, though. Listen. So you didn't hear from me for 3 weeks. So then by the time I was like, hey, I'm here, what's up? You were like, oh, I thought it was over because I didn't hear from you again. Yeah. And again, there's no right or wrong. It's just a communication. But this is what Scorpio can tend to do, because you didn't hear all that time. Scorpio is focused on basically what might go wrong. Oh, they can tend to look at the negative. I don't mean negative in a bad way, like you're negative, but in the thing, noticing the thing that's not there. Oh, you didn't contact me again, so it must be off.
Coming. And I didn't think you were coming. Yeah.
You didn't think out right. Whereas, but again, you want to understand, it was like, but again, the thing is that you didn't, for example, if I would have thought that, like, I'm Gemini, so I wouldn't have, first of all, I wouldn't have said it if I didn't have meant it to begin with. I would have said, oh, I'm not sure, let me know. I'll be in touch if I'm coming. I'll let you know if I'm not. I would have said it. And again, it's not to say it right or wrong. It's just a difference in style. Right. But if I were in your position and someone had said that and then I hadn't heard from them, like what happens with me, I would have contacted them. Like you could have said, hey, are you still coming? Like a week, like if you were wondering and if you were about to totally switch the plan and go, okay, now he's not coming, so now I'm out. Because by the time I was there, you were kind of out. You're like, oh, I didn't know. I would have said, hey, are you still, I would have reached out and said that. But again, Scorpio, because it's also feminine, is very much like what Scorpio can do is just decide for themselves, just kind of make the whole conclusion themselves. Like, oh, you didn't contact me again, so I guess it's off. So I'm not going to say anything, and that's it.
Yeah.
And this is what, and so this is what Scorpio can tend to do. And it's because they can tend to be looking for, oh, okay, I'm afraid that I'm trusting you, and then you're going to not show up, and then I might be disappointed, I might be upset. And so instead of going through all of that, I'm just going to kind of, not do it, like not get attached or triggered. So they just can tend to like focus on the negative potential.
Yeah.
And every sign tends to do this. this is actually what the guna is. It's a great lesson because every sign tends to do this. We fill the empty space with ourself and with our tendencies. And most of those tendencies come just straight from the nature of the sign. Like if it's a Scorpio, like if it's Gemini and I wasn't sure, I'd be like, oh, okay, well, let me just ask, and it would be like that. Scorpio, again, as a Scorpio, you filled the empty space with the nature of Scorpio, which is, well, I don't know, I'm not sure, so I won't say anything. So
Yeah.
and it's so funny. And then instead of even saying anything, which is like, well, why should I say anything? You already didn't contact me again, or like, it's like, no. So it's just kind of, we tend to fill the space, the empty space between things with our true nature. And a lot of it just has to do with those qualities of the signs. That's why it's so important to really understand those qualities of the signs, like the guna, the element, the gender, because Scorpio is also feminine. Mm-hmm. And feminine is very much about waiting. And your whole thing was, well, you didn't contact me again. It's like you were waiting for me to contact you again. I'm like, well, why would I already told you?
I know, and Gemini's, I know, and it's true. But
it's so funny.
It is, and I have been. But so for me, it's hard because I work on my life is like work crazy, and I, it's just so bad.
No, I wasn't even commenting even on the nature of that. I just thought even
that's how I do it. Like if I don't hear from it, it's just done. Like it's just if there's something and it's done, it just goes away. And then it is easier for me to avoid things. Yes.
Right. There you go. You said it. Easy for you to avoid things. Right. Rather than.
I mean, I do this with my friends.
I know. This is why I'm pointing it out. I know. This is why I'm pointing it out.
My sister, you name it.
I know. This is why I'm pointing it out. And I could tell that you really wanted to, because then when we did contact, you're like, oh, well, maybe this, maybe that. I was like, and you were really trying. And I was like, oh, why did you? I was just sitting there like, okay, well, I already said it. No, but I was saying it because it was, even at the time, I was like, this is such a perfect, like, astrological indicator of a Gemini and a Scorpio. We're talking one day. And it's like the Scorpio is very much like, well, you didn't contact me again, so I'm just going to avoid it. Like, this is what it's what Scorpio will do. It's like, and it's avoiding the frustration, disappointment, and maybe even potential anger of being stood up or whatever, or having to like ask you again or chase you down. Like, again, these kinds of things, it can feel like that to Scorpio at times. It can feel like it. And if Scorpio goes to do those things and then it doesn't get another response or whatever, they can get offended, get their feelings hurt. And it's like, it's just the nature of Scorpio. It's not a judgment. It's just, that's the reason why that happens. Because they're very, and again, it's very, and again, the other qualities of it is very, would say, like, intense and focused. And, you were really there. And I really appreciate that, because you don't agree to meet with everybody and hang out. And so it's important to you. And I guess the reason I'm mentioning it too is that notice what's behind it a little bit, which is like maybe that fear of being disappointed or getting your feelings hurt or wanting it and not getting it. And then so you just kind of avoid it and get, this is why they say Scorpio lives in holes, because Scorpio can easily kind of like retreat back into a hole. It's like, okay, well, I didn't hear from him again. And I don't know. So I don't know. I'm just kind of going to, I don't like you don't want to get your feelings hurt. So you just kind of retreat. Right.
Yeah. And I've talked about Mars K2, that's, to me, for the past 3 weeks, I've watched every crime scene investigation on YouTube. Every single one. I mean, every murder, I have became a recent, I don't know what's going on. I can't stop watching it. Like, I'm obsessed.
Yeah. So again, that's a lot of that Mars K2 in the first. And it could be hard on the Scorpio nervous system, that Pisces moon. This is why I say the real important thing with Scorpio is to find, especially your moon in Pisces, find pure things to occupy yourself, that devotional space. That's why I invited you to come to see Amma. I invited you to come see Amma. I was hoping you would come and meet Amma there.
I know, I just couldn't. But do you see how that's really hard? Do you see how that can be so hard? Because I have this like nice pure moon that's like, Revati.
Yeah, of course.
But then I have this like wannabe monster cop, investigator, CIA spy, / it's like completely conflictual.
Yeah.
It's like it's true. Like I would be like in the zone like that for a minute, but then I'm like back on focusing on crimes, figuring out the truth, figuring things out. Like it's just nuts. But that's why I love astrology too.
Yeah. So we all have some version of that.
Yeah.
We all have some version of that for sure. You know, I could go into my litany of distraction, inner conflict. That's why we're here. We have karma, you know. But yeah, this is why I say that, you know, because Scorpio and because there's this, because, you know, certain facets and qualities of each sign and of astrology in general take on exalted importance, like the nature, like the guna of the sign, for example, like which is what I'm talking about. It's a very deep motivator. Like it's like a prime motivational factor. You can take something like the guna and the element, and then also like the gender, because the element is with the gender, because water is also feminine. But just the guna, which is the motivation, and the element, which is how it's processed, those two things are so prominent in everything we do, right? And you can see the inner conflict there, because again, like I said, the tamasic quality of Scorpio, not including Mars K2 in the first, but just of Scorpio, is to, as you would say, get to the truth, investigate, look at the dangerous stuff, and get all intense and emotional and passionate about hidden agendas and dark things. You know, underneath it all, it's a sort of protection. There's a sort of fear base to it, where we're trying to protect ourselves and make sure that we're safe and those around us are safe, and that we get to the deeper truth. Because again, there's a lot of underlying stress and fear. But then you have the moon, like in your case, then the moon is in a sattvic sign, which is wanting to believe in the higher powers, wanting to believe, and naturally believes in something beyond. But again, those things come together, especially this is why people practice things like yoga. Yoga is a pure teaching. Vedic astrology, Jyotish, is a pure teaching as well. When I say pure teaching, I mean it's not about desire and getting something and getting somewhere. It takes that natural power of Mars and Ketu and makes it disciplined, brings in discipline. Like instead of kind of spinning out on crime stories or murders and stuff like that, like you even say yourself goes a little far. You take the same energy and power and make yourself strong and powerful and courageous in the face of what you can't control.
Yeah.
Because the biggest problem with Scorpio is this awareness that you have no control. It's literally the sign. We all have it, whether we have any plants in Scorpio or not. It's the sign and the area of life where we feel vulnerable and realize that we have no control, because we don't. We have no control.
And I hate that. Like
I'm sure. It's what motivates everything, huh?
Oh yeah, control is the story of my life. Like if I
know.
can't control it, I don't, you know.
But you have to realize you're never going to get control. You have control over nothing. Maybe for small moments of time, but even then, it's just an illusion. Because even whatever it is you're doing to look at crime, murders, or whatever, police scanners, or whatever, even all of that is based on things you have no control over. Electricity could go out. Then what? The Russians could attack our power grid. Then what? Oh, well, that would never happen. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
A sunspot, a flare could come and wipe out communications for 20 years. Oh, that'll never happen. Yeah, right. Could happen tomorrow. What?
You think that will happen?
Oh, all of it's going to happen.
When?
I don't know. I don't care.
Just curious. Just curious.
Some version of that or something like that. Of course, things are heading to a point that are unsustainable. So we should all be ready.
Yeah.
And so again, the thing is that we can try to focus on some outer form of it, or the real power of Scorpio is not to stress out over this illusion of control, but it's to have the courage to face themselves and control themselves rather than control outer circumstances. Because Scorpio
that's what I've learned over the years. I can say that because I've learned that controlling others, now it's all about me. Like everything. That's one of the reasons I really liked astrology, because I felt like I had control of myself. Like you know. Yeah.
And so that's the great superpower that Scorpio has. Once their energy becomes more evolved and more mature. When it's immature, then they use their powers of perception and to manipulate and to feel the emotions of other people to control them. But then they realize every little victory when if you've controlled someone and misled them and controlled them, it's only going to benefit for so long, because once a person realizes you control them, you've lost.
Yeah.
And they don't trust you anymore. So
you get bored.
Well, not only do you get bored, but you also lose the thing, because again, here's the sword, because you're only going to get involved with things you care about. So you're only going to try to even put the attention on someone that you care about. Once you care about them, then you might be afraid that they'll leave. So the only people that you would care enough about to try to control anyway is someone that you don't want to leave you. And then once they find out that you've controlled them, they leave. So there's the self-fulfilling prophecy cycle. Does that make sense?
That's definitely true, for sure.
Right. So that's how it doesn't work. And every sign has some version of doing this, for sure. But that's the Scorpio kind of lower quality of its nature kind of spinning out on itself. Because Scorpio doesn't focus their attention on many, very driven by the heart and what you love and what you want to focus on and what you want to invest in. That's why, like I said, I felt very, I felt sad when we didn't hook up in Annapolis, because I could tell, she really wanted to do this. And I know that you don't just want to hang out with anybody. So I was like, and so anyone that you would get involved in, it's because you feel emotionally invested and you really like them. Again, but then sometimes when it gets too far, Scorpio can be like, okay, now I'm afraid you might leave. So I'm going to try to do some little things to manipulate. And of course, it's someone that you care about. Otherwise, you wouldn't even put the attention in. And then they realize that you've kind of manipulated them a little bit. And then they're like, okay, now I don't trust you. This is self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Yeah. And not just with you. Again, all signs have some way of doing it. But in many ways, the Tamasic signs can be a little bit more of that sort of manipulating. That's what they have to be careful of. Do you know what the Tamasic signs are? Like which ones are Tamasic?
I have it in my notes somewhere. Yes.
I know.
I do.
I know you have it in your notes because I saw that big spreadsheet that you had that time.
Yeah. But I do somewhere. Not like that I look at on a daily. I'm going to be honest. Like I have been so swamped with things. I haven't had studying time to study. It's been all just doing readings, which is
Well, the reason I'm asking is because that's the reason I'm talking about it too is for people watching that are interested in astrology or even just qualities of life. It's not just important. It's again, everything is not as important as other things. We can focus on a lot, but it's one of the most important things is really understanding how that comes to life. Mm-hmm. So and you might notice this, the ones that can be like that the most are Virgo, Scorpio, Capricorn.
I was going to say Capricorn, yeah.
Aquarius. Yeah. So those are the four that are Tamasic. And again, you want to understand the motivation is to try to protect themselves. Like it's a protection, but also a lot of strength and power because it's somewhat reserved and able to, sense the danger. Like Virgo senses all of the details that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
This is why Virgo is so worried. Oh my God, what about that one detail that might get through and kill us all?
Oh yeah.
That's why Virgos can be so stressed. It's like, but what about this? And so they'll gather all this information and have all these spreadsheets. You have Venus in Virgo, right?
I don't do. I hate spreadsheets. I hate notes. I don't take notes. The only notes I take is astrology.
Well, I did a recent thing because Venus is in Virgo now.
You're good with that. You're really good at talking about that because you're so spot on with Venus in Virgo. Yeah, it's true. Everything you say about it is true.
Yeah, like spreadsheets of problems. That's kind of the way. Yeah, finding
relationships. Yeah, nothing else. Just relationships. They don't care about anything. Like nothing else is focused like that. Just like, pleasure. Money. Yeah. It's more. It becomes more materialistic. Like I don't like being outside getting bug bites. You know what I mean? This is a debilitated Venus in Virgo, in my opinion.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm not an outdoorsy person. Like I have no desire to go like sit and camp in the forests.
Well, you live there right by this is mosquito season. I bet you love that, right?
Yeah, I'm a walking can of off. You have no idea. It's everywhere because I get.
Do you all still get lightning bugs down there?
Lightning bugs, yes.
See, I grew up like 5 miles from there.
Mm-hmm.
It was great driving around. I just wanted to drive around again because I hadn't seen my old neighborhood since 1986.
I bet it's grown a lot, unchanged.
No, it hasn't changed at all. It's still a one-lane road.
Which road? Where was that? Which?
It's called Bayside Beach. It's down at the end of Fort Smallwood Road and Bayside Beach.
So I sell homes literally right off of Sully.
Solly Road.
Mm-hmm.
Solly Road. My grandfather lived on Solly Road, so I actually drove down Solly Road too. That's one of the roads.
You probably passed me at work.
I might have.
Yeah.
I actually drove down Solly Road. I drove down Mountain Road. I drove through, I was staying in Annapolis, but then I also went down. So I'm from Pasadena, so then I would drive down Fort Smallwood Road. And I grew up in Bayside Beach, so then you turn off Bayside Beach Road and all the way at the end. Not even the little beaches, not even the neighborhoods along Bayside Beach Road, but all the way at the end. So if you go all the way down the end of Bayside Beach Road, have you ever been down there?
Yeah, I swear my old superintendent used to live in like a house in that scenario, and there were just a few houses there. Possible? Was it on the water or close to the water?
Oh, yeah. I wonder if it's someone I know. If they grew up there, I know them because I grew up there in the 70s.
Right, and you might be the same age. Selby? We probably shouldn't be saying.
Yeah, don't say their name. I don't want to say their name.
Name on YouTube.
Don't say the name.
Yeah.
So that's where I went. Yeah, because that's where I grew up, and it's near Hancock's old house, right? John Hancock had a house down there.
This has got to be it. Yes.
Yeah. No, that's the neighborhood. So it's the last one, because when you turn on Bayside Beach Road, there are also neighborhoods off to the side. I was at the very end of the road. And what was so weird was that everything seemed so small. I mean, it's the same stuff you always hear people say, but it's like it used to seem like that drive from Bayside Beach Road to Fort Smallwood Road was like an hour. And it was like 5 minutes. What happened here? And it's just like, it seemed like, I walked on the streets and all these hills that I used to ride my bike up. It's like, I remember riding my bike up this hill, and it seemed like that hill was forever. And it was like 15 steps. And it was hardly even steep. I don't know. It was just really a trip. It was cool, but then it was also like it didn't have the charge that I thought it would have. I thought it might be like, oh, here's where I learned to swim, and I start crying or something. I don't know, but none of that happened. It was like, okay, yeah, wow, and it almost just looked like I think because nothing really changed, especially in the old neighborhood. It was almost just like pristine. But then even along like Mountain Road and some of those areas, some of it had really changed a lot, but it was oddly familiar and yet strange.
Yeah. That's how I feel when I go home to Pittsburgh.
Oh yeah.
It's that same, I know that feeling. I can't explain it, but it's like that. Yeah. Weird.
How long has it been since you go back, or when you went back?
I go back like if somebody dies, or I go back for Christmas usually, but that's it. Like I don't like going back home.
Well, this was literally 23 years. Mm. That's a long time. Yeah. So the thing that I'd forgotten was how many trees, like the lush green trees, like along Route 50 and stuff. Because I've been living in California since 1998, and palm trees. And I mean, literally, like you see palm trees, or then like when you get outside, then you see mountains, and it's a lot of mountainous terrain and a lot of stuff like on the side of the highways, the Sierra Nevada, mountains and the ocean and all. But I'd forgotten like how many trees, like even going down Ritchie Highway, I'm like, where did all these trees come? All these green trees everywhere, huh?
There's a lot. Oh,
it's amazing when you haven't been back for 25 years and you look at it. I was like, like Route 50 was blowing my mind. I was like, God, look at all these trees. I know it's weird, but when you're not used to seeing it for 20 years, it's pretty wild,
When my friend Jenny came up here from Florida, she said the same thing. She's like, oh my God, there are just so many trees here.
Right.
There really are. It's even from Pittsburgh, there's a ton of trees.
Yeah, I lived in Pittsburgh for about 2 years. That's right. I lived in Sliberty. I lived out Sliberty. Oh, that's near the Bloomfield Bridge Tavern.
It's so funny.
Yeah. So anyway, anything else, or what do you think?
No, I think that's good. I think everybody it's true. Be open. Don't get so tense. It's tense out there right now. It's definitely,
Yeah, what I would say as far as if we're talking about advice, more than anything else, like is to try to use our discrimination. Remember that, honestly, like for me, that we're all in it. And we live in this age of spin. Man, we're living in a spin zone. with no consensus reality. I mean, again, you can say that it was better or worse before. I'm not even going to get into the judgment, but at least before we all kind of it wasn't as easy to divide around total different consensus realities or total lack of consensus reality. And forgetting that there's a bigger game being played, and we're kind of getting played, I think, by a lot of machinations. At least that's what I think.
I think we all have been forever. That's like, and that's what makes me think this is kind of strange. This isn't really, but that's where my mind starts going then, like, why are we here? You know, like, why did we sign up for this? Like, why are we controlled? Like, why, you know, and it's like, not like, why do everybody pays taxes? Like, you know, your mind starts going down that zone. I don't know if your mind starts doing that, but, and then it's true. Like, you know, I always say this, that we were using this clock-in system for expenses and stuff, and it was called Chronos. It was like, it's just little, and they like, I don't know, it's just weird. And
yeah, and I think what happens is that, my hope is that as we use our discrimination and not be so intellectually lazy, and we actually start to look at things and remember the bigger picture, especially who's benefiting from everyone, at least on a cultural level, who's benefiting from us all being divided? That's an important question to ask. Who's benefiting from that?
Yeah.
And on a personal level, though, this is the important thing also. This is no different. It's actually no different than the entire history of the world. It's always been like this to some extent. We're in a more accelerated level now. We have access to more things, to more information. Consequently, we have a greater possibility of being spun and deceived. The reason is because we have more at our fingertips. They're the same. One isn't separate from the other. But in its own sense, this is no different. They've always talked about the end of the world. Doomsday scenarios are nothing new. You read Indian literature, it's nothing but asuras taking over the world and darkness against evil. There's no difference. This is no different than anything else. But because we're so connected on so many different levels now, and there's so much coming at us, it's easy for us to lose our true self in that, much easier than normal. Because we live in interesting times, we tend to focus on the external at the expense of the internal. And so that, especially at the times of eclipses, it's really a time to try to connect with the spirit. And in this sense, we talked a lot about it, which is that purity, that pure love in the heart, that pure quality of devotion, which is not transactional in our desire-filled relationships, but is actually found in that selfless love, not just that we might have for our children or our pets, but for anything bigger than ourselves, where we're willing to show up. And that could mean in our community or anything else that we're willing to be devoted to, that's not just about our own,
right,
payoff.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good
point. Anyway, it's always good to talk to you, Miss Heidi.
You too.
You bring so much, and I really appreciate you and appreciate seeing your growth over the years, back when you used to bug the hell out of me on Facebook.
I would say, can you please just give me a reading?
What's this?
No.
That's all right.
I tried to get I had told everybody I had so many freaking astrology readings, okay? And the one person that wouldn't give me one was Sam. I would be like,
but I'm the only one who told you that you'd be a good astrologer, as if that's what you said, right?
That is very true. Sam is the only one that did say that.
I think I probably looked at your chart and I said, look, you don't need a reading. Just keep studying. You have a great chart for astrology. Just keep studying it.
What you said. Actually.
Right. I know. I probably said, look, you don't need a reading. You're just looking for some kind of thing. Just keep studying. You have a great chart for astrology. Keep studying it, and you'll do great work. And that was the reading.
That's true.
I know.
Exactly what you said.
I know. I take care of people just because, yeah. So I take care of people. So, but that's what it was. It was obvious. So it's good to see your growth and what you're putting out there. And, we'll come back on again and we'll talk about some other sort of stuff. I had the idea before that we would talk maybe about some of the mythology and stuff, because not just that, but like some of the stories. Like,
yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, because again, we tend to think, And I know especially people that are really, maybe wrapped up in a lot of the dramas of the world tend to think that, again, like these times that we're living in are new somehow or whatever. But this kind of good against evil and asuras and devas and all this has been going on a long time. And Indian spiritual stories, especially things like the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita, and that, the kind of symbology in that is very poignant for the age we live in now. I mean, it's a lot with that we can learn, and ways that we can live a life according to dharma or purpose. And again, it's not some kind of religious belief. It's a code within ourselves so that we're true to ourselves. It's not some external religious thing. Again, it's a spiritual code of truth that we're all here to embody. Because you said, well, then why are we here doing all this stuff? Again, when you read those kind of books and you understand and you put those things into practice, that code of honor and dharma and truth, sacrifice, devotion, those things become very clear. But those things don't take place in some like fairyland. Bhagavad Gita is on the battlefield of war and more political, crazy situations you can imagine. The Ramayana, these twisted fairy tale, soap opera dramas that the protagonists are in are really great allegories of our time. So maybe I'll come back at some point and talk about those kinds of things. That
would be good. That would be real good.
Awesome. Okay, so you have a great eclipse.
Too, thanks, Sam.
Have a great eclipse. All right.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.